Hey everybody, this is Talkative Carl, back again for another Christmas movie review. And today we'll be covering, honestly, one of my favorite non-superhero related movies that I happened to just stumble upon should I say a couple of years ago, almost three at this point. Uh, the movie called uh, The Man Who Invented Christmas. Uh, this is like a specific focus about Charles Dickens' life. The moment where he was coming up with the story of A Christmas Carol. Honestly, one of my favorite stories I ever read in my life. I literally got the book. I should have got the freaking book, off my shelf. It's like sitting like literally like over there. I don't feel like get up and go get it. I should have done it so I can show you guys. Uh, it's right up there so far as like Edgar Allan Poe's, you know, a few of his works, and then Alice in Wonderland. Like all those are just like my favorite books I ever read, in my life. And there's been like he was such an this man, he probably wouldn't have guessed in a million years how this specific story will shape the world, and more specifically Christmas, years after his death. And at some point next week, I will be reviewing uh, my favorite adaptation of the Christmas Carol, called Scrooge, starring Bill Murray, which happened to be uh, released in theaters in the same year as, like, I think in the summer, but it's in the year of my birth, 1988. So that it was part of this, also the same year as Beetlejuice. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of stuff in it's like 80s horror comedy kind of thing, or comedy horror, that was like in abundance in the 80s, leading into the 90s. Uh, but yeah, so we're following Charles Dickens' life. You get to learn a little bit about Charles Dickens through this story, which is, I think, is like uh, a nice little window into his world. And you get a little interesting, fun facts when I was doing like a bit of research into you know the creation of this film. But it begins in like 1843. This is like 4 years after his him publishing Oliver Twist. Uh, I remember reading Oliver Twist in school, but it's only a Christmas. Oh, and also Great Expectations, but none of those works really resonated with me as much as A Christmas Carol, because of course, A Christmas Carol, by and large, is supposed to teach people not to be, just to boil it down to it, not to be an ass throughout your entire life, because you know you don't want to live your life as a complete asshole, because beyond this world there's going to be ramifications, and you don't want to be sitting alone on your deathbed with nobody around you, because you effectively push everybody away that would have gave a damn about you. But yeah, Charles, in the middle of trying to come up with a next big idea. Sorry, I feel like I got like hair in my eye. Get some water. Now, Charles's life, a little interesting fact. He pretty much lived his life in a pretty like a decent man. Uh, like he gives whatever money he has to the poor, despite the fact that he's in a bit of a financial hardship, because the past few books didn't sell that very well, and he's currently in a writer's block. And every there's moments throughout this film is like really cool moments. This movie. Oh, by the way, before I get too into the story, this movie was directed by Bahet Naluri, starring Dan Stevens as Charles Dickens, the late Christopher Plummer as Ebenezer Scrooge, Jonathan Pryce as John Dickens, Simon Callow as John Leach, Donald Sumter as Haddock / Jacob Marley, Miriam Margolyes as Mrs. Fisk, Morphle Clark as Kate Dickens, Justin Edwards as John Forrester / Ghost of Christmas Present, Miles Jupp as William Makepeace Thackeray, Ian McNeice as Edward Chapman, Anna Murphy as Tara, the one of Dixon's servants / Ghost of Christmas Past, Jasper Hughes Carter as Walter Dickens. So, yeah. Now, he's as Charles is going through. I mean, just recall what I was about to say. The way the director is shooting this film, and the way the writing went, is brilliantly done. Because the director mentions in his research is that, or at least with historians, they theorize that Charles Dickens might had at the time bipolarism, because he gets in these moments of just utter not necessarily depressing, but he has his highs and his lows. And when he's in his lows, which is depicted in this film a lot, in the point of view of his wife, it seems you just don't want to be around him. And he has some kind of, I don't know how 100% true this is. They I'm not saying they play fast and loose with this moment of his life, but they had to take at least a few liberties. But I imagine it has some grain of truth, given historians view Dickens as would have been treated for bipolarism, given his behaviors in his life. And he had this kind of rule where he's not, when he's in his office, which is a nice little setup, the way it's surrounded by all these books all over the place. He got his desk where it's quill and ink, and his method in coming up with characters. He mentions that you come up with the name of your character, it'll be easy for you to know what they're about. And you see this moment when he's trying to come up with the name of Ebenezer Scrooge, and he's you see him, it's he's pacing around, and he's his body contorts, and he's trying to get the word out, but he's just not getting it. Scratch, scrounge, scounge, Scrooge. And it's and it's the character manifests in his mind, and the way it's brilliantly shot, and it's you see the manifestation of his creation when he just get it right. And you see him getting a little upset with why he's in his groove, which I can understand. When I write, or when I'm doing these videos, or when I'm trying to audition for some voiceover roles, I do get in the trying to get in the mindset of a character, and I'm especially when I'm auditioning for a voiceover role, I'm trying to get in the mindset of a particular character, and I'm trying to get in a role for it, and I'm just come up with each type of different emotion, and trying to get inside the head of a particular character, especially if I got a illustration, I'm trying to, or probably better yet, when I don't have an illustration, I'm trying to formulate the character in my mind, and like it's a process. And it is annoying when, somebody's like interrupting your process, So I can kind of understand. I think any creative can understand Charles Dickens in this moment when like you keep getting knocks on the door and he has an obvious rule. Do not disturb me unless it's, extremely important. And he gets like very agitated and like, he bites people's heads off when they do that, unless they, when they give actually a good reason, then he changes his tone very quickly. So now, because like, his failed like past few books, his publishers, because everybody's like, oh, work with Oliver Twist was such a great hit. Are you going to work on anything else? And it's like, yeah, I'm gonna work on anything else. So he just like, just so he can try to stall for more time, just to get out of the debt he's in, because he doesn't want to be in debt. And that's kind of like a running parallel between his character of Scrooge and himself. There's going to be a lot of that throughout this film. Because in a way, it's another retelling of A Christmas Carol. But this time, in a very unique way, it's the actual author who's going through this process in this story. And it's like brilliant storytelling by the director's part. So he does not want to... He's not a greedy miser by any stretch, but because of what he experienced in his childhood with his father, who dropped my water top. Didn't want to sit on the floor forever. Because of what his father went through, so far as like putting himself in debt, and if you look this up, his father had like history of being owing people. Like there was like a moment where he owed a baker's some money, a few shillings too, on top of that, which is like American version of some change. At that time, the law was in London that if you owe someone's money and you fail to, pay it back, or you can't pay it back, they put you, away, and they seize, whatever assets they can to pay off the debt. And sometimes they put like their children in like workhouses, which, Charles Dickens actually had to be, put in for, a few months until his father eventually released. But, because of that horrific experience, because he didn't have like an obviously good time in those workhouses, or workhouse, to help pay off a debt his father owed. So he didn't want to, end up like that. He refused to like, if he owes somebody, he gonna make sure he pays it back straight away, or try to stall more time so he won't put his children through that. So like I can understand that. So it's kind of like he's kind of on a clock at this point. It kind of reminds me of my movie review of, Dracula Untold. If you haven't checked it out, please check out that video up on my YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/talkativecarl. Follow me on my various links beneath the video. My patreon.com/talkativecarl. Twitter at Talkative Carl, and of course you can check out my Twitch channel where I play tons of video games, twitch.tv/Talkative Carl. And my review on Dracula Untold, Vlad the Impaler had like a bad experience, being put pretty much into slavery by his father just to avoid a potential war between a larger army of the the Turks against his more smaller campaign by comparison. And so, his horrific experience prevented him from choosing to allow his own son to be put through that he'll did the opposite. He did the opposite. He willingly went to war just to avoid having the children of his own kingdom, including his own kid, being put into that position. It's like it's kind of like the whole parallels between what the parent has go through and how it would be applied, and how their experience will as a parent apply to their own kid, and how that will affects them. It can easily go the opposite way. Wherever kind of situation it happened, it can easily go one way or the other. So now, like the publisher's like, "Oh, you got a new idea for a book?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he just blurted out, "It's a Christmas book. It's gonna be a Christmas book." And given the fact that keep in mind, at this point in history, Christmas wasn't like a major holiday, as we celebrate, uh, years long after the book was created, whereas like a staple of a holiday moving forward. This was kind of like a social kind of holiday. Is not like a national thing. It was treated like what's a perfect example? It was treated like a holiday where it's optional to celebrate, like somebody it's optional to celebrate your own birthday kind of situation. Like no one wants to make a big thing out of it, at least most people. And so Scrooge, now he kind of like put himself in the corner. Now he has to write a Christmas book. So he spent time trying to come up with like the characters. Now along the way, he bumps into people that says certain lines, or has certain names, or certain looks that really clicks with him, that he applies. He has a notebook, and he hears him and his the guy who John Foster, Forster, this literary critic and / best friend of his. They go to this bar, at least it looked like a lounge, but like one of cigar bars or cigar lounges kind of thing, and one of their waiters is like this very like ancient old man, where he's struggling to like even like open like the wine or champagne bottle, or walk there, let alone open up a bottle. And he introduces himself as Marley. And he goes to a loan officer, and he literally has a safe wrapped up in chains, and he applies both of those together. You'll see later on. And he runs to this, after, he went to some kind of gala or opera or something like that. There was this like obviously miserly old man with his wife, after he sees Charles, give money to like the poor, what little money he had on his pocket. He made like a snide comment, like, about these old people, and so like they should be done away with kind of situation. And like he mentions like, where would they go? Like, are there no workhouses? And then you hear that, and the score in this is fantastic. It's like every time you hear like something that you obviously will remember, because everybody and their mama had read or watched a version of the Christmas Carol, so they know certain lines and key phrases and names, and as soon as you hear it, it resonates. And that moment when it resonates with Scrooge, that score hits, and like light bulb moment. So you're like, are there no workhouses? Boom. And you see like this he's a greedy old white man. It's like the old school version of white privilege, standing in like a not tux, but those classy little outfits. And as he sees, and there's another moment where, like, you remember from like most iterations of Ghost of Christmas Present, before he leaves, you see these two, malnourished children hiding underneath his robe, and he sees this just a creepy, vile human being who's pretty much like, putting two children in the like pretty much like using them as like as like a sex trade kind of situation. It was like horrific. It's like a horrific thing to see. And he runs away with them as Charles trying to give chase. But you see that moment where he's like have them underneath his kind of big cloak kind of situation to keep them hidden from officers of the law if he has to, a kind of situation, or just reveal him when like he's somebody's feigning some kind of interest, which I can't imagine any vile human being even doing something like that. And as soon as I saw that moment, my instinct was like, oh, God, I hope Charles Dickens just beat his ass. I'm not it's like, I'm pretty sure that's just play to the effect of the story. I'm not sure if Charles Dickens actually came across a vile human being like that. Who's to say? But it's possible he saw two children that would have gave him the inspiration to put two malnourished children, with the Ghost of Christmas Present. And as he's giving chase and losing track, he, ends up in the cemetery where a funeral is just wrapping up, and you see Christopher Plummer, like a splitting image right off the page, Ebenezer Scrooge. I mean, like, the only other person I think like fit the mold of as Ebenezer Scrooge, like right off the page, will be I'm about to say Charles Xavier, but Patrick Stewart. That's a movie I wanted to review maybe next year. I'm doing Scrooge this year, but I want to do like his version next year. But and he just mutters humbug and walks away, and then that humbug kind of sparks something. He runs back home to get the writing. But and you see he has a happy lifestyle, happy home with wife, children. He had like a lot of not a lot of children, but at least 4 kids, and they still like relatively small children. Probably ages from like 8 to like 12, and he has like these servant maids taking care of the household, along with his not sure what his wife did for a living. Given that time, I imagine not much, but what is Charles Dickens' wife's name? Catherine Thompson Hogarth. Dickens. But he also had like extramarital affair with a mistress, but Catherine Dickens was the one they put into this movie, and they obviously didn't want to bring up that whole mistress thing. That's like long after this book was already published. But he came up with the whole idea of like he got the main character, Ebenezer Scrooge. Now, what will he do with this guy? That's when like one of his servants, Tara Murphy, Tara, played by Anna Murphy. She's Irish, and it's funny because like at the time, the way like the dialogue went when this Irish servant says certain things about her homeland, because I guess Irish people, were known not to be literate, but she was. And like when she speaks of the old country, they made certain not comments, and it's obviously not meant to be. They're obviously represent like very nice people. They like been very nice people of that time. Given the fact that Charles Dickens wasn't, he believed in Jesus Christ, and he respected Jesus Christ, his actions, but he hated the organized religion of Christianity. That's the thing. And I think a lot of people today would like, he's a very liberal person of his time. And I think a lot of people today would respect Charles Dickens, as a man of principle. And like, he wasn't perfect, but, I imagine if he was alive today, he wouldn't look past, he would look past people's, he probably make some verbal mistakes, but he'll definitely look past and see the person, look past like the color or nationality or whatever, and see just the person and treat him, he or she, like a person. But when he hears like Tara speak of like during Christmas time, that's when like the spirits, it's like it's kind of like Halloween, when like the veil between the hereafter and the real world is at its thinnest. The spirits come visit the earthly plane, and that gives them the inspiration. Oh, we're gonna put ghosts in my story, which the publishers and even his friend Foster, find it like, I mean, of course, Foster always backs him up in front of people, but when this is like a mark of a good friend. I like Foster when he's like, along with Charles, he speaks his mind, but and when he's like doing business with other people, or he's like or at least not around his family, he like backs whoever play Charles put himself in, like it's like a good friend. So the publishers didn't not for one didn't think it was a good idea to mix ghosts with Christmas, because it's commonly a like a children's thing, and they assumed it was gonna be like a children's book. But they also didn't find it too keen on making a Christmas book in the first place, because it's not like a very celebrated holiday. So he just Charles just decided, well, I'm just gonna publish it myself, which he ends up going to the loan officer to like put on a loan to be paid back, like almost twice as much like by January, to be paid back. And he had to make sure that this book does extremely well, otherwise he's in the shitter. So he's going all out, making sure that he goes to the illustrator to give him like notes on what he wants things to look like the cover and everything like that. And so he's trying to work, okay, like, what are these three ghosts? He come up with like, what are these ghosts? And then you see like manifestation of Ghost of Christmas Past in the form of Tara. That's where like his mind comes. He attaches Tara's face to the Ghost of Christmas Past, because if you watch any version of the Christmas Carol, each and especially when I did my review on Batman Noel, is a comic book version of Batman in A Christmas Carol story. Check that video out as well, because that's a really fun comic book to read. And like each version of the ghost had a distinct look to him. Ghost of Christmas Past is like, supposed to feel like an old friend. A very nice, like soothing, like kind of thing. Usually a form of a woman. Very easy on the eyes, enticing. Encourages you. Make it easy to encourage you to follow her to like in the past or nostalgia or like that kind of thing. And in the present, which he got the inspiration from looking at Forrester. He's like big, jolly, rosy cheeks, because one of the illustrators trying to depict the Ghost of Christmas Present like a frightening specter, and it's like, no, that's not how I want him to be. So he dresses up Forrester in like a makeshift like robe, like a green robe, and like give him like like these like twig things, and place them on his face as like a big long red beard, and it's like with a lantern in his hand, and it's like that's my Ghost of Christmas Present. He's big, he's jolly, he talks to you like a friend. He's like he sticks by you kind of situation. He tells you tells how it is kind of situation. And then of course the Ghost of Christmas Future is supposed to be unknown, shadowy, and of course kind of scary. Not that dissimilar to maybe like a Grim Reaper, who by the end of your life you will probably be he will probably be the last thing you'll see on your journey of life. In the future. So then you get like while he's trying to get this task done, he's constantly being bombarded with like all these mishaps. Most notably, his father, who he's estranged with, because he kind of like, and not to mince words, kind of exiled his father into like this, on the outskirts of London in like a cottage where he gives his father like an allowance to be able to, live, nicely with, with his mother, and, with, John's wife and everything like that. And if there's any cons I have about this movie, it's Charles Dickens' parents, most notably, or more specifically, John. Now, obviously, the way it's been depicted is what the director upon research, how John will probably have behaved in real life, because he was constantly in debt, and then he, which was wild to me. And once I looked this up, he actually, because like in the movie, he actually tried to sell like his own son's old manuscripts, because he's like a popular author, so manuscripts would probably go for like a high amount of money. And so he was like, he wasn't a horrible human being. He loved his kids and his grandkids, and just like any grandparent, you don't want to come and shower them with like gifts, and like grandpa is here, let's have some fun, and like no care or forethought of responsibility. And he brings home this big crow that he bought off by selling one of Charles's works, and it's just like, morally he's a good person. I'm not saying morally, it's just like deep down he's a good person, but he is just like, it's like fiscally irresponsible, and like as like a parent / guardian or grandfather, he's like very irresponsible and just like has no forethought, because like is the equivalent of trading on your own kid's name because they're popular. Can you imagine if Michael Jordan's dad traded on his son's name to get all these exchanges of goods, or get out of all these certain debts and everything like that? It makes him like very shitty. It's like, why would you do that to, like, why would you do that to your kid? And it's like, you put him in more trouble with other people that, he doesn't realize what you're doing. And it's, I didn't like him, and at the end he's supposed to do some kind of reconciliation with, his son and everything like that. But it's like, no, he's a bad father. He's legitimately is a bad father. And like, it's because of him and his, the way he doesn't handle his debts, letting his own kid in like a workhouse, and he doesn't, and he treats it like he behaves like he hasn't grown up, and I don't expect him to go the other way and being like a hard ass and like not loving. He loves him, but it's just like it's just like he behaves like an irresponsible teenager and with no forethought about the consequences of what he's doing. And I just did not like him. He's probably the one thing I did not like about this movie, and it's like it drives me crazy. And I know it's the purpose. It is just like, wow. And upon research, it seems like he was legit kind of like this guy. He did legit in history. He did sell a few of his own son's old manuscripts just to, pay off debts or buy crap. And I'm pretty sure if he was alive today, he'll probably it's like equivalent being like a gambling addicted father kind of situation, where it's like he sell a lot of the family stuff just to pay back debts that he put himself in, that kind of situation. So he's coming with like this big crow in a case, is getting loose and then breaking a chandelier, which Charles now have to pay extra money for, which he already is financially in a hole as it is. And it's just he does not acknowledge, the father does not acknowledge that fact. But now, like, and then there's another, his mother and his sister and Charles's wife, all like, telling us like, he's your father, he's like, it's like, it's like you gotta, it's, get over your past kind of situation. But I'm thinking to myself, no, like to some extent, he should be able to get past what happened. And, obviously in the end, he reconciled with his father, but his father never owned up to his own crap. And the rest of the family doesn't bother to acknowledge, or at the very least, if they did acknowledge, they don't either show it, or they don't show it by at least confronting the father about, like, your son is a good man, and he's trying, and he's been trying to like do good by you, but the way you carrying on is the same thing you've been doing when he was a little kid, and you have not changed. And this whole theme of the book and the movies and the iteration of the movie and the story is that people can change. And you see a lot of change with Charles, but there should be some change with the father, and it's never, represented. It's like he got let off the hook without any accountability. That's what kind of gets me. So, putting all of that aside, as much as that's irking him, he's still coming up with like ideas. And then, when he's like manifesting like Jacob Marley, and it's like, you're visited by 3 spirits, and he's looking at Charles when it's like, Charles is like, you met him, right? It's like, no, Charlie, you. And so like he sees like past, he goes through a deep dive in his own memory of the time when it's like he was having a good time with his siblings and his father, hearing cool stories from his father. He's a storyteller himself in life. And then like here come the debt collectors, and like watching his father getting hauled away in like a back of a wagon with his siblings and his younger siblings and the mother. And it's like, his father's just holding his hand like, stay strong, son. And it's like, you piece of shit. You're a piece of shit, father. And I can't believe you did that to your own kid. And so now he went to these workhouses, and this is obviously a painful memory. It's not something like any kid. I can't imagine kids back then that they're working these. As probably, matter of fact, it's not that different from, those sweatshops that we have now when people making, overseas in Asia, making shoes on like a few cents an hour, and it's like, that should be handled because child labor laws, but like not every country has child labor laws. But I'm pretty sure apply the sweatshops to these workhouses, but you know it's can you imagine like those sweatshops that we hear about over in Asia, and multiply that with like put a majority like spots all over each country that almost it's in abundance kind of situation. But by the time Charles Dickens gets to an older man, those things are like shut down more and more. So those kind of things, they kind of learn those kind of things were unsafe for children and unhealthy, and it's just morally disgusting. But then you along the way, as he's like, it's kind of like Dexter when him just talking with Ebenezer Scrooge, but nobody else is all in his head, and so he's not physically talking, but he's just in his head talking to Ebenezer Scrooge, and he's walking along this like little market area, and he gets the idea of Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig, and you see these people in this like little square dancing around to like the violin and everything like that. It's just like the classic dance of like Scrooge's supposed first job that he around that time he started getting an idea to start saving up money and going into business for himself. Probably the last happy Christmas party he ever attended to in his younger life. But then you see like Ghosts and Girls. You see all these people that he's coming to ideas with, and they're kind of like, yeah, I like Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig. You see the moments of the idea of what's that? Crap. His Ebenezer Scrooge's employee. Shoot. I'm blanking on that freaking guy's name. Bob Cratchit. Yeah, so you see the Cratchit family and like Tiny Tim, and then he regales Tara when he makes up part of this story up to a certain point before he came across a mental block, mostly because of his like agitation, because his father being here brings up old memories that he doesn't want to face, or he has to face, but he refuses to face, and because of that, he hasn't finished like the final chapter, but he tells enough of the story to Tara, who loves stories. She's distraught, as well as Foster, that the whole thing about Tiny Tim being sickly and on a crutch, and it's like normally prior to this Charles Dickens books usually end in like a death, usually like a main character, or at least one of the main characters. I guess that's kind of like a running thing at that time, and they kind of expect like Tiny Tim to die. It's like he's going to die. That's how using my work works. And it's like you can't let Tiny Tim die. It's like what Ebenezer Scrooge, can he do something about it? Well, he can't. He's like a mean old miserly person. He's not going to change. Someone like that, he's old. He's not going to change. He's set in his ways. It's like, well, that's not right. And then you hear his friend like telling us like, and he put it like pretty good. The way the dialogue is read is like, it's supposed to be a Christmas story, and like, it's supposed to have like a moral and like mean something. It's supposed to end in like some kind of happy note, and if it ends with something like Tiny Tim dying, then what's the point? And it's still not registering with, it's not clicking with Charles at this point. It's like, you know, consider, a lot of them like these idiots don't know what they're talking about kind of situation. But then, when after he's a night of drinking with Forrester, he comes home and he sees his father rummaging through his own garbage for trying to find more manuscripts. And you can see like this is a moment, at least a shred of an instance of his father, just because he's in tears and he realizes like you think I want this, it's like it's kind of like he makes it seem like he has to do this because like it's like your son give you an allowance. I mean, and I'm not know how much of an allowance is he was giving him at that time, but imagine at that time it was significant. Not like crazy amount because he wasn't like wealthy, but he was like a famous author of the time, and like he probably made enough to give like a decent allowance to his father to live nicely and comfortably out on the outskirts of London, in a nice cottage, so he was away from any kind of temptation from like gambling or being influenced by anything that might end up putting him in debt and back in jail again. But he just like he goes off on his father, how like he can't stand the sight of him kind of situation. You want him gone, and then he goes off on Tara, where she ends up leaving as his wife lays into him because she can't you think it's easy living with you, Charles, constantly have to walk on eggshells whenever you're in your little moods. It's like nobody can tell like when you're joking or when you're in a funk. It's like it can be all over the place. That feeds into like the historian's notion of he can easily have been bipolar in his life, and they obviously at that time wouldn't know how to deal with that or let alone diagnose it properly. So in an angry kind of haze, he goes back to that dilapidated workhouse that he used to be in, that he got beat up by like the older kids when he was there, and it's like all that traumatic events obviously like affecting him like well into his adulthood. He never dealt with that properly, and it would have benefited. Of course, I'm pretty sure there were psychologists at that time, but I don't think like they were any good at that time. It was very those kind of people that were still into like weird science to try to like cure people of their psychosis, and by and large they were just torture. And but he could have like easily talked to his wife properly and air out his issues so that way she can at least be there for him. She always been there for him, but like now he's kind of like expressing himself and like being vulnerable, so you understand like, okay, this was happening as a kid because of what my father did kind of situation, and because of that like it led me to like not wanting to end up like him. And so in this moment you see Charles and Ebenezer Scrooge going like verbal attacks on each other, as not physical attacks, but it's just like Scrooge is dodging while it's mental fighting. And of course Scrooge is part of him, so he can't really beat Scrooge, but then he comes to realization that he wants to change, and so mentally that applies to trying to like get rid, because like as Scrooge put it, he's a stain on his soul, and that gave him Charles the idea, okay, I'm going to remove the stain, I'm going to break this cycle of hate. I want to I want to live my life as a good person and not what you're going to turn me into, because I don't want to end up like a mean miserly old man because of something traumatic that happened to me. So that you see the awesome image of Charles mentally putting Scrooge into this grave, which signifies that final moment of Scrooge, you know, if I can borrow from Batman Noel that I reviewed the other day, when it's read by Bob Cratchit, it's like, sometimes these hard asses and stubborn, D-heads, sometimes they can't be just told to, take that leap and make a change for the better. Sometimes you gotta hit them upside the head with a shovel in order to get their attention. And that's what, like, guy like Charles or Ebenezer Scrooge, who at this point in their life are pretty bullheaded, you need something like that to jerk them into wanting to change. Which Scrooge, in his mind, yes, I want to change. And that finally give him like that encouragement he needs, like, to make the final chapter. It's like, yes, Scrooge can change, because we all have the capacity to change for the better. And as he wrapped it up, it ends nicely. He Tara comes back. He makes up with her, as well as running out to catch his father before his parents leave on a train back to their home. And he mentions, like, come back. I'm a horrible mistake. I'm sorry. I love you. And then he meets the cop who has the last name Copperfield, and gives him an idea of David Copperfield book. And he turns in his manuscript, and it all comes together into a nice, the first, the iconic first copy of A Christmas Carol. And it's like a big red book with embroidered words of A Christmas Carol. And Forster and his fiance and the Dickens family and the servants all share like a nice Christmas get together in the house, and they have like a Christmas tree. And Charles made a comment about the Germans call this a Tannenbaum. It's a tree of Christmas, a Christmas tree. It's kind of like name dropping a superhero or something like that. It's like, or like the way, like, in Age of Ultron, when Banner is like mentioned, like Wakanda. It's kind of like that. It's kind of like they trying to name drop or something. And so everything ends with the final text of the film mentions how A Christmas Carol like sold out so quickly, because he had like this all started in the middle or late October, and they had to make sure this is like published by Christmas. So he had like a 6-month period to get this all done, which he managed to accomplish. And like it sold out like gangbusters. And it mentions how influential this story became, and it kind of really hammered home how important Christmas is, and generosity, and being with friends and family. It literally paved the way of what Christmas is as like an important holiday moving forward. And it's all thanks to Charles Dickens. He pretty much is the man who invented Christmas, if you truly think about it, or at least invented the modern take on how we celebrate Christmas moving forward. And and that is a man who invented Christmas. I really dig this story. Like I said, the only problem I had is probably the father, like everything about him, and how other people besides Charles, seems like to let him slide on crap like that. But it seems like Charles is in the right, in a way, in his own way. He could have handled it more peacefully and with more of a clear head, but he's not wrong about how his father acts and how his father behaves, and the questionable things he's done, that landed him constantly, not constantly, but for at least going at least a couple of times, spent like a few months in prison for his debts that he never bothered to like acknowledge the fact that he had a problem and he shouldn't be using his own son in order to skate around all that or pay off debts that his own son doesn't know about. And that kind of thing. I just wish that was like that part was handled a little bit more better. Even though it's the truth, it should have been handled in a way that just because at least show some moments where it's like the wife is laying in, just like Charles's wife laying to Charles about his behavior with the family and towards the servant girl Tara. John's wife should be laying into him about the way he's using his own son in order to skate by, and he hasn't learned anything from his experience when Charles was a little kid, and that is a problem. Apparently, as it happened at least a couple more times long after the whole creation of the Christmas Carol. But eventually I think he got better. But yeah, this is like a solid story. I highly recommend you checking this out. It's definitely on Amazon Prime. You can easily look it up and check it out. A great, especially when you get inside the head of Charles Dickens, and this is probably like helpful for a lot of writers to see like someone like Charles Dickens and his process of creating characters. I thought, as a writer myself, who published a book. If you don't know, I have published a book. It's called Epic Tales of the Emerald Avenger. It's on Amazon. You can check it out. I repeat again, Epic Tales of the Emerald Avenger. That's a book that I wrote a few years, not even a few years back. It's been long ago when I wrote that book, but it's like a superhero book, and like it's just the whole the mindset of an author. It's like it's like there's like a movie, I forgot what it was called, but I think it stars John Cusack, and he's playing Edgar Allan Poe, and I forgot the movie is called, but it's like you get inside of the head. I saw that movie at least once or twice on TV, and it's like a nice one. It's like another favorite author of mine. You get inside of the mind of Edgar Allan Poe weeks leading up to the point of his death. And it's awesome. I really probably want to get that on the list of things I want to review for the channel. But yeah, I do highly recommend this movie. Check it out, especially around Christmas time, where you get the sense of how this man shaped the holiday as we know it moving forward. But yeah, I will see you guys soon for another Christmas movie review. Stay tuned for that. And yeah, I will also be pretty soon tomorrow I'll be going to C2E2 in Chicago. If you live in the Chicago area, you might see me roaming around getting merch and everything like that. And you can definitely drop by, say hi, whatever. And yeah, I'll by the end of that event, I probably won't be there for more than maybe like a few hours, and then come home, do a video about showing off the stuff that I bought and everything like that, for you guys. And yeah, I look forward to that as well. And I will see you guys next time. Peace.